I'm not chasing the trends. But once in a blue moon, I see one that I like. And it's actually something I've been doing for ages anyway. Just the fact that you see it more frequently now is cool. So slits on pants, different ways to do them. I have 3 ways to show you. You can add these to any of your pant patterns and just give them that little bit extra, you know? Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina from liftingpinsandneedles.com. Welcome to this channel that is all about sewing, limitless sewing, and today is about slits on pants or split hems. Sometimes they are found in different parts of the pants. You can find them on the sides, you can find them in the center. I've seen some styles lately that are really long, like that long. So there are plenty of ways that you can do this. Now, as a general guideline, just my aesthetic, I prefer these on straight leg pants or maybe with a slight taper. I don't like them when the leg is really wide and flared. It's a little bit windy. In the 3 examples that you'll see, the legs are tapered or straight. The first way I would say is the proper way to do it, on a side seam. That is, in my opinion, with the side seams open. I think that gives you the cleanest look. Serge the edges separately for the front and the back, and then when you sew the side seam, you use the sewing machine and then you press the seam open. Now this, for me, in my personal sewing, will be exactly the same whether it's a knit or whether it's a woven. The only thing that will change is that if it's a knit, I will sew that long seam on the sides with a narrow zigzag that will allow stretch. I'll probably be hemming with some type of twin needle, and if it's a woven, then I'll just be using a straight stitch. But the way that you can add this onto the bottom of any pant, it is going to be exactly the same if you do it on a woven pant or a knit pant pattern. So let's see the method. Super short little clip for you to see. I've even included mitered corners there. This is a hack you can do to any pant as long as the leg is straight, like you see it right here. Basically, this pattern uses 3/8 of an inch, and that's what you can see marked in chalk there. I measured from the bottom 3.5 inches up. Now the hem is going to be 1 inch, and I wanted this to be 1 inch also. So the original pattern would have been there on that line there. So I just measured from where the seam allowance would be so that I had 1 inch there, and that is the excess that you see. So I measured from here to there. I have 1 inch, and I also have 1 inch at the hem. Basically, the slit is going to be super little, just 2.5 inches, nothing super dramatic, just a little detail on the side. And I have the same thing done to the front leg. Now I don't cut this as a total rectangle because it's hard to serge. I'm going to be serging these separately, and it's easier to serge when you have a little curve there and then you go down like that. So I'll basically be sewing up to there, up to that point there, and then the rest will be open. And because of the width of the slit and the hem allowance is the same, I'll be able to do some really quick mitered corners, and it's going to be super neat. So the difference with these pants is that I'm not going to be serging them together. I'll be serging them separately, and I'll be using the sewing machine to do the side seams. Here are both legs, side seams pinned, and now we're ready to sew. I'm going to be using a shallow zigzag for mine. I have that little slit detail at the bottom, and I just want this seam open. That's why I'm using a sewing machine. I'll be using a 3/8 seam allowance. It's a really long straight seam. If you are just sewing a regular side with no details, then I would definitely be serging this. Here we are getting to the bottom where we see the slit detail, and I have a little mark up to where I'm going to sew. This is how the little slit is going to be inside. The whole seam will be open. Look, what I've seen in ready to wear and in some patterns is that they have you serge everything, and up to a certain point you snip and then you separate this, and I really don't like that. So because I'm sewing and I can do what I like, I'm just going to have the seam open like this. I have shown mitered corners before, but this is a really quick refresher. Because the amount of fabric we're folding from the hem and the side is the same, 1 inch, then the method is really straightforward. All you do is multiply the 1 inch by 2, or whatever distance you're doing. Just double that. In this case, it's 2 inches. So from the corner, I'm going to measure in 2 inches and do a little mark there. From this corner also, 2 inches, do a little mark right there. And then get a ruler. I'm just using my seam gauge because it was the fastest thing I could find, and just draw a diagonal line here from that dot to that dot there. Then what you do is fold this right sides together. You have this tip right there. You align that dot with that dot there, and you have your line already marked, and that is what you need to sew. This can be done in only a few minutes, and I think it's really neat. And you can just use a straight stitch for this. Just leave a 1/4 inch there, and now we can flip this right sides out, and we get the mitered corner for this little slit. There's just 4 of these to do, so there's 3 more. You can see that from the straight edge of the hem, I've started with the twin needle there, and I finished the same on the other side. Now I don't want to do this little slit area with the twin needle because I can't pivot properly. And I do a type of fake pivot sometimes with the twin needle, but I usually reserve that for prints where you won't really see the detail. But this is a solid and I think it would look ugly if I do the fake pivot. So I've done it like that, and I've got these 2 threads through a big needle, and I'm just going to push these threads back and knot them. Then I'm going to sew the slit down with a straight stitch, and I think it's going to look much neater. Done something extra just for fun on the side seams at the hem, and here you can see what I've done. It's a little slit and I love that, gives it something extra. The example I was showing you there were the flared leggings from Green Style Creations. And this is a side seam where I did the little slit right here. I did the hem with the twin needle. I did the seam with a narrow zigzag. Now this can be a little bit controversial if you are just really convinced that you can't use the sewing machine to sew neat patterns. I'm telling you, you can. You can definitely use it and just press your seams open and it will just be so much neater. Here I am to say that you can use your sewing machine to sew neat garments. You know, if I was making the flare, you hear the thunder. If I was making these leggings without the detail on the side seam, yeah, of course I would have serged that seam like I did the inseam and some other seams of this pattern. But you can definitely add this on, and I think it looked really nice. Now these are called flared leggings because they are slightly flared. I did straighten the leg out a little bit so that I got rid of a little bit of that flare. They're straight leg, they're not tapered, they're not wide, they're just perfect, and I really love this one. Super nice pattern. So if you want to do the same thing, just replace the narrow zigzagging for your straight stitch and you can do the exact same thing on a woven pattern. Remember, I did the mitered corners here. I planned to do that when I added that inch to have as hem allowance inside the slit and the same hem allowance on the pants. That's just the easiest way to do the mitered corners. If you have different distances, it is possible, but I just don't want to go there. I just want my mitered corners to be easy. That's why I do it like that. And I did a hack. I have a seam going all the way down the center of my front leg with a little slit. It's something I'd wanted to do for a long time and it was a super easy hack. I don't know if you can hear the rain, but it is pouring. My gosh, I'm like right next to a window right here. Anyway, the technique that you saw there is the same thing I did with the front legs of my legato jeans. The only difference here was that these pants didn't have a seam in the center of the leg. I just cut my front pattern piece in half lengthwise, just separated it and then added the 3/4 of an inch seam allowance from the top to the bottom. And because it's denim, I decided to top stitch the sides of these seams inside, and then I have my slit at the bottom. It's got the mitered corners just like you saw in the tutorial. So in this case I have a 3/4 inch hem allowance, and this is the same 3/4 inch seam allowance I left on the slit. So exactly the same. So what you've seen, you can do it on the side seam, or go ahead and have fun and create yourself a seam in the center of the leg. I think it looks really cool. Before I show you method number 2, and in the context of this pant that I've just shown you, the flared leggings from Green Style, they are having their Black Friday sales. A lot of pattern companies are, but I found out they were having one yesterday and it goes through Monday the 28th, I believe. 40% off. It's quite a big discount. I really enjoyed the activewear patterns. I've made quite a few of them. I have videos about them on the channel, leggings. This year I even made a couple of sports bras and some tanks. I've had a lot of fun with the brand and sewing these garments. So if you're interested in any of them, I will leave you a playlist down below with all my Green Style makes and my affiliate link if you want to use it. Okay, method number 2 is sort of similar to what we've seen but different at the same time, and you might have seen this method in some ready-to-wear garments. I suppose they do it like that because it's, I don't know, I have seen this a lot on shirts that have the slit on the side. So I am focusing this on pants, but you can do the same thing on the side seams of a dress, a shirt dress, a shirt. Just take these techniques and put them wherever you want. I've just chosen to show you these on pants because that's what I was doing and those are the examples I have. So let's see. It was just taking an opportunity of a pant that was fitting a little too wide than what I wanted. I had originally sewn the side seam with a 3/8 seam allowance, and then making a small change made this second technique happen. So let's see. After wearing these pants for a little bit and noticing that the linen was sort of giving and they were turning out a little wider than what I wanted, I'm just going to take them in at the side seams a little. Tried it on and I pinched where I wanted that to start. So here's the pocket bag, sort of at the full hip, and then I'm just going in gradually until I'm in by 3/8 of an inch. So that's the original seam, that's the new seam. And now because I'm going to have extra seam allowance here at the bottom, I'm going to get like a good 3/4 of an inch seam allowance. I want to do a little slit just to make good use of this opportunity. So I have unsewn the hem right there. It's serged, but it's all open here. This is where the hem is going to be folded. You can see the crease. I want the slit to just be 3 inches, nothing too dramatic. So I've drawn a line there and I've done some unpicking. So I've taken all that serged edge, all the seams, and now here's the new seam, but I've already unpicked part of the old seam and part of the serged edge. So basically just a little above where I want the slit to be, I'm just going to align these raw edges here. So this is where the seam is going to go, the new seam here, but from here on it's going to be a slit. I want to leave that 3/8 seam allowance here. So from here I'm just going to do a line and then gradually just come out like this, so that I have a little bit of a wider area above where the slit is going to start. So I'm basically trimming away this excess of seam allowance, and I'm going to be serging the edges again. Just going to make sure I keep that 3/8 seam allowance up here as this gets gradual. Over here from this new seam line I want to keep that 3/8. So from here I have to serge again. But first I want to serge this edge separately, about 2 inches above where this little shape is. I'm going to serge separate and I'm going to serge it separate, and then at just this point I'm going to join it and then keep going all the way up. So I've got these edges where the slits are going to be, so these are going to be separate, and you can see there is a stitching line. This is where the slit's going to actually happen, and they are going to be separate, but just for a little bit. I'm going to start serging about there, these layers together now, but here they're separate, as you can see. Now I'm going to pick up the seam. I had partially unsewn it and then just stitch here up to that line right. Okay, so here is one of the side seams. This is the open area that has a slit. So I'm just going to fold it with the seam allowance that I have here, 3/4 of an inch seam allowance, because I made the sides a little narrower. So I wouldn't be happy to do a slit with a 3/8 seam allowance. I think that just doesn't look very good. When you walk, you could probably see the white fabric inside. So I think 3/4 is a nice seam allowance. If I was doing a hack on a pattern, I would add this seam allowance, but this is just a thing of opportunity because I wanted my pants a tiny bit narrower. So you can see that up to there it's open, but then from here up we can just press it up. We haven't done any snips or anything, so I'm just going to press the seam allowance towards the back leg here. If you look at some ready-to-wear shirts that have slits, you'll probably see this inside. So I think this was appropriate for these pants here. Basically because here on the top near the hip I just had that 3/8 seam allowance, the original one, and I didn't really want to unpick all that serged edge to have the seams open, you know, so I think this was appropriate for that. Now at the bottom I'm going to keep it simple. The hem allowance is larger than what I folded here, so I'm not going to do mitered corners because the way I do them is really fast and easy, but making sure that the hem allowance and this seam allowance is the same. So I still have my memory crease from the original hem. I'm just going to press that and then fold this over like this. Super simple, no fuss. To sew the hem and the slit, I'll do it in a continuous seam, and I've done some really quick hand basting just to hold the seam allowance of the slit inside without them moving anywhere. So that's how that looks inside. For the hem I don't need that, the linen will pretty much stay. So on the slit area I'm using a 5/8 seam allowance and the hem allowance is larger, so I'm adapting to that. Okay, so there is a brand new slit on the side seam. I think it's gonna be super cute, very neat, no drama. As you can see with this one, you have the side seams together partially, maybe about 2 inches before the actual slit happens, and then at that section you have it open and serged separately. I'm not going to show you the full detail of this project because I'm making a separate video about these, so you won't know what pants they are. But I think the little slit was a great addition. It shows off your shoes on the side. It just looks really nice and adds something different when these pants didn't have them before. So if you have a pair of pants that you want to take it in at the sides a little, you might want to try this hack because you're going to have that extra seam allowance there, so why not? Now the third one, you could actually add this onto anything, even something that you've already made already. If you have a piece of fabric that matches the color of your pants, you can add this on, and that is to add a little slit in the center of the leg at the bottom with a facing. You don't have a seam down the leg, there's no seam involved. I will say this technique is a little delicate. Once it's done, you get a tiny seam allowance inside the slit, so it is a garment that you would have to handle with care. But it is something I added to a pair of pants also after the fact, way after I'd done them, just to do something fun and to show you something that can be done. So let's see. I have these other pants, and these pants had a cuff option, which means the hem was a little longer and you would just fold it up. But after wearing it a few times, I found it bulky over my shoes, so I just decided to remove that cuff detail, and then I was left with sort of a really long hem allowance. So I cut out that piece that was there, and now I'm going to use that piece to make a facing. So it's just a really simple rectangle. The width here is 1.5 inches, and the length, I think this might be about 5 inches. I've interfaced it, as you can see, and I've serged the edges, and I've drawn a white line across the center. And this is the idea. I've already done one of the legs. This is the front leg. I drew a line across the center of the leg and I put a facing, and that's how I did this slit. So when you look in there, there's a facing. This type of slit doesn't need you to have like a seam going all the way up the leg, although I prefer that. I think I do prefer that a lot, but since these pants were already made, I can't really go and do that. So this is another option to adding a little slit here on the center. And it's not too long right here. This is about 3 inches. This would be so much easier to do if you hadn't sewn your pants and you just did this on the front leg like separately, if you didn't have these seams, but the pants are made. So here we can see the hem allowance. This has been pressed already, so that's important. From that hem allowance up, I drew a line 3 inches in white, the same type of line I've drawn here, and this is what I'm going to match now. So from the edge of this rectangle, I'm going to put a pin about 3/4 of an inch down, and that's what I'm going to match to the top of this line here. Then if I lift this, I can see the white line. It has to be right on top of the one that's at the bottom, basically right in the center of the front leg. So what I did to get this line in the center of the leg was meet these two seams like this, and then I just folded it, and that's how I mark that half point of the front leg, and that's where I want this facing to be, facing right sides together with the pant leg. So I've got it there in the right place. Now I'm just going to give it a quick hand baste right there. I have just hand basted that on. I've marked my white line a little thicker so I can see it better. And I do want sort of like a thick line. I don't want a thin one, because that's going to be a reference for me to sew around it. So I'm going to sew on the outer edge, and that'll give me a little space in the middle. Now what I forgot to tell you was that I interfaced the wrong side of the pants where the slits are going to be. That's just to stabilize that area. You won't see it when you wear your pants, and I forgot to tell you I did that before. So basically now I'm just going to sew right here. I'm going to do this with a shorter stitch length, shorter than what I usually use, maybe like a 2.4, especially around this area here. It's going to be a little bit tricky to get this, you know, on the sewing machine because I have all these seams, but it's still possible. Okay, so that was sewn. Just take these off. I just left this longer. Doesn't matter, you can just trim this away now to match the hem right here. And now you can see that there's a little gap between both stitches right there. And I'm just going to snip through the center, getting up to the tip but without going through the seam. Now you can see my hem allowance where it's already been pressed. What I'm going to do is do a stitch here, right there. Now this is just way too bulky, so I'm going to cut it shorter here by about 3/8 through both layers, but I'm going to stop before the edge, and then I'm just going to cut through the facing right here. So cut the facing all the way through, but not the green pants. For these, I want to stop about 3/8 of an inch before the facing and then cut through there. I do want some of the length to be behind the facing right here. So I want to show you what I mean. I cut all the facing short, that doesn't matter, but the pants, I want the longer end to be inside the facing. So beyond the seam, inward here. This is a really delicate seam because the seam allowance you're left in there is really, really small. So you just have to be really careful when you manipulate and flip. So I'm just going to fold this and do a gentle flip. So I'm just going to wrestle with it, but I think that's okay. Okay, and then just take the rest of the facing and flip it to the inside like this. And that's how the slit's going to be finished. So I'm going to play with this, tidy it up, give it a little hand baste, and then we can just top stitch the whole thing. Okay, so the hem was sewn along with the slit in one go. It looks pretty messy right now, but once it's pressed, it'll be nicer. While I was sewing the bottom, I was using a 3/4 inch hem allowance, but then as I reach this area, I swapped to 1/2 inch, going up about 3/8 of an inch above where the slit starts, across, and then down again, and then like that. So it caught everything inside. It's super neat. I have a slit without needing to do the seam all the way up the leg, and it's pretty discreet. It'll be almost at the floor. No one's going to see the detail that this is not super crisp. Now this business of having that tiny seam allowance inside makes this area super delicate. That's why I interface the back. So it's all covered by the facing now. You can't ever see there was any interfacing around here. But I would be really careful with these pants of washing them in a really gentle cycle. Maybe even hand washing them because this area is a weak area of the garment. Okay, I've just pressed it and it looks so much better, right? It looks so much neater and so much flatter. So that's a little facing slit hack. I would not do this technique without stabilizing the area where I'm going to cut into the slit on the main pant. The seam allowance in there is going to be tiny, like an 1/8 of an inch or something less. So I think it's really important to fuse that, draw your line in the middle of the leg, and then do the whole technique like you saw. I'm also just going to show you the slit, not the pants. And I think it looks really cute. It looks really neat. Here I have a hem allowance that's larger than this that I was able to get in there with the facing inside. So I didn't do my dead corners. You saw how I did that, and I think it's a really neat finish. And it's gonna look cute. You can show off your boots or your sandals or your sneakers or whatever. You can add this onto any pant. Even if you have some ready to wear, you know, if you have a piece of fabric that matches, you can just create your own facing and just go ahead and do the hem and just add that on. And I think it's a cool little trick. I'm having a lot of fun with my sewing. I'm having fun thinking up these ideas and sharing them with you. I hope you are enjoying the content. Don't forget to subscribe because there's a lot of sewing content for you made with a lot of love from here. Just join the family here at Lifting Pins and Needles. I'll see you again very soon. You'll see me a lot in the next couple of days. I have a lot of content coming. I'm also getting ready to travel to see my parents next week. So hectic times. I'll see you again in a few hours. Bye.